introduction. So I will pass it over to Michael.
So I'm not going to, is this microphone helpful to anybody? Shall I use this? Yes, okay. So I'm not going to blather on at great length, except to say that about me, I mean. Except to say that it is really just delightful to be back here at Grace on a Sunday morning, on a sunny day in September. I think I've been at worship at Grace on Zoom a couple of pandemic moments, but nobody can remember that, and I can't either, really. Except that I remember Stephanie Batterman's hospitality in the living room where we were Zooming from. But it really is a treat to be back. When I was at Grace, I remember the vestry meetings. I don't know where they take place now, but they used downstairs or on Zoom. Oh, okay, good. Well, that hasn't changed. They used to be at a long table right over there. And I remember a vestry meeting one winter day, and I remember thinking, I love my life. I love my church. I love my vestry. I love my family. I love this town. And oh my God, I need to see something other than Bath, Maine, or I'm going to go crazy. And I talked to my aunt and uncle, and they had just come back from a Mekong River cruise. And they said, deeply considered thought, right? They said, we think you would really enjoy going to Laos, which at that time had just emerged from years and years of being completely shut off by the so-called bamboo. You remember the Iron Curtain? Well, there was also the bamboo curtain, and Laos was on the other side of that after the Indochina Wars of the 1960s and 70s. They had just recently kind of reopened their borders, and I thought, okay, that's good enough for me. And so I went, and my connection with Laos and my connection with Grace Church kind of evolved together. So let me tell you the story, because you're part of the story, and it really is wonderful to be able to sort of connect the ends here. It is June of 2023. I am in a bomb field. Around me are a dozen young women, mostly the age of my daughter. You would remember her, those of you who remember her as Liddy. She's now Elle. They're mostly her age, mid-20s, late 20s, young women, scanning the sort of the charred ground with metal detectors. And every time they hear a beep, 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 they would stop and put down a little marker, and in due course go back, pinpoint the location of the metal signature that they had just found, dig up the bomb or the piece of shrapnel, or sometimes the tin spoon that had been dropped, but frequently bombs, and move on, and just laboriously, bit by bit by bit, clear this field. About 8 months later, I made another trip to Laos, and I was standing in a field with a farmer with sinewy arms and a very raggedy t-shirt and a straw hat. And we were being sheltered from the hot sun by cassava leaves that were shimmering overhead. He was showing me the tubers at the base of the cassava plant. Cassavas are if you know, they're kind of like sweet potatoes in a way. They're big, they grow just sort of a little bit out of the ground with a big green stalk going up, covered with leaves. When you pull up a cassava stalk, you get 6 or 8 of these tubers. And generally what happens is they get dried, they get ground up and dried and made into flour. And if you are a villager in Laos near the Vietnam border, as this guy was, you sell your cassava across the border to Vietnam, because apparently Vietnamese people love cookies made with cassava flour. And they pay money for that. Amazing. And, you know, Vietnam and Laos are both communist countries, but people do pay money for stuff. And they need money for stuff, and the money comes back across the border into Laos and into the village where this farmer lives. He also showed me the rice paddy that he had and his village companions had burned off, just waiting for the rains to come and fill up this sort of squared off dike field. And he showed me the pond that they had dug, which would fill up with water when the rains came, and I could hear the thunder in the distance, literally. I was there, I think, the last day before the country became more or less impassable because of the rains. That pond would fill up with water and be stocked with fish and provide protein for his village. This was the same field. This was the same place where I had been 8 months earlier. And it was our team that had cleared the fields, cleared this land, and allowed this farmer and all of his village neighbors to have income, sustenance, protein. The fish that they grew would be protein for them. The cassava that they grew turned into money for food and healthcare and education. And the rice that they would grow would be a level of sustenance that they hadn't had for years and years. The story of Laos began a very long time ago, as did the story of everything. But this part of the story of Laos began about 50 years ago when I was a child. I remember the Vietnam War going on. I don't remember it terribly clearly. My parents sheltered me from most of the challenging realities of the day. I kind of discovered them when I was 30, looking backwards. But I remember the Vietnam War playing in the background of my childhood. The Vietnam War, as I suspect most of you know far better than I do, was essentially a conflict between communist North Vietnam and non-communist South Vietnam. We were on the side of the South Vietnamese. We did not want them to be taken over by the communist North. The dividing line between North and South was right about here. And the North Vietnamese, who were fighting the entire war in the South, we bombed the North occasionally, but basically it was a war fought in South Vietnam to reunite South Vietnam with North Vietnam. The North Vietnamese ferried troops and supplies down what we call the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They called it something like Route 572. But we called it the Ho Chi Minh Trail because that was a lot jazzier. What I didn't know as a child is that the Ho Chi Minh Trail almost entirely ran through neighboring neutral Laos. It wasn't mostly in Vietnam. So the Ho Chi Minh Trail crossed from North Vietnam into Laos right about here, went down through Laos on the Laotian side of the mountains, and then filtered back into South Vietnam. There were several different sort of trail ends, some into Cambodia, some into South Vietnam. We had made a promise, the United States had made a promise in a treaty prior to the outbreak of hostilities, the treaty that actually divided North and South Vietnam. We had made a promise that essentially demilitarized Laos. And we were concerned not to have ground troops operating in Laos, but we also really did not want the people and the supplies to continue flowing through Laos into South Vietnam. And our response was to bomb this Laotian trail incessantly for a decade. We dropped, as I said in the sermon earlier, we dropped about 270 million bombs. It was known as the secret war. Well, it wasn't known as anything for a long time. Then it was the secret war. Then it wasn't a secret anymore. But we basically denied that we were doing anything in Laos for a very long time. But what we actually did was we dropped a ton of bombs for every man, woman, and child in the country. most Americans have barely heard of Laos. Has anybody here been there, first of all? Wow. So let me describe it to you because I'm involved in trying to clean up all of this old ordinance. But I hate the idea of anybody sort of thinking of Laos as just simply, a bombed out problem. It's an incredibly beautiful country. It is a long, thin country. Well, let me set the location first of all, just in case anybody's unsure of that. So this is Asia, obviously. You may be too far away to see the screen clearly, but let me point out what it is showing. This is China. India over here. Southeast Asia kind of hangs down like a stubby peninsula between or under China and next to India. Thailand occupies the center of that peninsula. Vietnam occupies the western side. I'm sorry, the eastern side. You'd think I would know that by now. And Laos is like a long, thin broccoli stalk, just sort of tucked in next to Vietnam. So the capital of Laos is Vientiane, which is right next door to China, I mean to Thailand. If you're in Vientiane, you look across the Mekong River to the lights of Thailand. The old colonial capital is Luang Prabang, sort of in the center of the broccoli head. And the bombing that we did during the war was mostly along the stalk, if you will, on the mountainside next to Vietnam. But I said I wanted to talk about what made Laos so beautiful. When I first went there, I left that vestry meeting, I went home, I packed my bags. Darby said, "Have a wonderful time, don't forget to come back." And I went over to Laos and I spent about a week and a half in Luang Prabang, which was incredibly difficult to get to. I mean, you start out in Bath and you go all the way around the world, and then you're there. 12 hours time difference, so it really is exactly the other side of the world. And I woke up my first day there and I really felt like I had gone to another land entirely. Well, I had, but another world entirely. It's a place where the mists of the morning sort of lie over the river. The sun rises orangely through the green trees. Files of saffron-robed monks walk through the streets, collecting their daily food alms from their neighbors, because what they collect every day is what they eat, those monks. And the city is full of temples, and the temples are full of monks. Some of them venerable, grizzled veterans of the monkhood, some of them little children who are doing a temporary stint as kind of baby monks because that's part of the culture. People just do that. It's a place of rushing blue rivers. It's a place of the wide, not rushing, brown Mekong River. It's green jungles. It's sizzling, spicy food. It's incredibly, people come back from any trip they ever take and they all say, this is one of the lies of life is the water's comfortable once you're in. Another is the people are so nice. They really are so gentle and so kind and so gracious in Laos. And you feel it as soon as you arrive. There is a hospitality and a simplicity to life there. Partly because there's not a whole lot of money. A big day in Laos is to ride your Honda scooter over to your friend's house and have a case of beer Lao waiting for you, and then suddenly it's tomorrow. It's a simple, colorful, easy place. And they're remarkably welcoming of visitors, particularly Americans. What we did during the Secret War is something that I'm not proud of. They don't seem to resent it. They really don't like the French, who colonized them for 50 or 60 or 70 years. And to them, we were just sort of like a codicil to the French chapter. Maybe they're forgiving the French now. When I first arrived, nobody would say anything nice about a French person, except they like the croissant. So, So Laos is, I think it's one of the loveliest places I've ever been. And I kept going back, and I began to learn about not only the beauty of the country, but also some of the shadow side of the country. I went to a wedding in the town of Vang Vieng. I think that was still when I was here. And I was dancing on a runway that turned out to be a CIA abandoned runway. And I began to learn about the shadowy history of this secret war. I volunteered at one point for a small nonprofit that was teaching Laotian farmers how to do organic farming. And I learned to be suspicious of nonprofits because I learned that the Europeans who were doing the teaching knew nothing about how to do organic farming in Laos, but the Laotian farmers had been doing it for 2,000 years. And I began to learn about the bombs and the legacy of the secret war. And here's the thing. Here's why I'm involved in this. There are still, to this day, 80 million unexploded American bombs in Laos. We can have discussions about whether the war was a good idea way back then, but it's not a discussion I'm very interested in. That was a long time ago. And the problem is now. And whether or not it was appropriate to drop those bombs 50 and 60 years ago, it's not okay for Laotian children today to be endangered by them. Most of the bombs, most of these 80 million bombs, are small cluster munitions. Most of them are known as BLU-26s. I know that. So does pretty much every Laotian child. This is a BLU-26. It is about the size of a tennis ball. If anybody had sat in that chair and moved that tennis ball, that would have been the end of their lives had this been a BLU-26, because these things fell from aircraft in their millions, and they were intended to, and most of them did, explode either when they hit the ground or at a set altitude right above the ground. As they fell, they spun. They had vanes molded into them that caused them to spin in the air, and that was what armed them. But sometimes they weren't dropped from high enough. It's a humid climate, and most of the technical specifications for munitions, especially at those days, didn't really account for humidity or climate or local conditions. Some people argue that they were made cheaply because they were made in their millions and they were bought in bulk. Whatever the case, a third of them didn't go off. So they landed and they sat on the ground. And over the course of years, they worked their way into the soil and they kind of disappeared from view, which was good in one sense, because it's harder for a child, say, to pick up a bombie, as they call them, that is underground. But things that are buried keep working their way to the surface. If you have a garden with rocks in it, you know that. Plus, when they work their way into the ground, they don't work their way into the ground very far. And so anybody who wants to use that land, for instance, and try to plow it, is at risk of instant death. These things are designed to, they're basically like, I don't know how clearly you can see this, but this is a bumpy exterior. It's a soft metal shell, essentially with shotgun pellets, ball bearings, set into the soft metal shell around an explosive core. So when the bomb goes off, it is designed to, and it does, release essentially a 360-degree shotgun blast. The purpose is to kill anybody within 30 yards. Yeah, 30 yards. So when we detonate these things, we unroll 300 yards of detonator cable. That's a long, long way. That's here to Edward Street and way beyond. Bombs that are in the ground can be set off if they work their way to the surface and somebody moves them, if a plow blade hits them, if somebody digs where they are, if a bamboo shoot, and there are a lot of bamboo shoots, lifts the bomb up to the surface, if it rains and there's a little bit of erosion and bombs work their way out of the soil. This bomb was there on this ground 2 years ago. It had been right to the side of this plot of land and had been moved by somebody who was moving some earth because what they wanted to do was to expand that school. So this is a bomb, this is a schoolyard, and there are no children because, of course, they've all been evacuated. And the bomb was in due course destroyed, but it would have been so easy for a child to pick that up before the adults noticed it and dealt with it because they are everywhere. The moms and the children. So I learned about all of this. I learned about this as I visited Laos more and more. I visited teams that were doing bomb clearance work. And it occurred to me that what I really wanted to do was to fund one team that otherwise would not have existed. There are government-sponsored teams. The United States funds a number of them. So does the United Kingdom and Norway. A handful of governments fund teams, and they fund a complicated bureaucratic structure that tracks what land has been cleared, makes sure there are good records of what has been done. Because, of course, if you clear land and you don't remember what you've cleared, it can't really be used. So having good records and the structure to keep those records is really important. The US, the UK, a couple of other governments fund that kind of work, but there are villages that will wait another 100 years before anybody gets to them to pick up their fields and clean up their fields and make them safe. And I thought, I can't, as a single American citizen, I can't change that for everybody, but I can help change it for some people. So I wanted to fund one team that otherwise would not have existed. And this is them. This is Mine Action Team 53. They are administered and operated by Mines Advisory Group, MAG, that's MAG's logo. They're funded by us. They were previously funded by the United Kingdom, but the United Kingdom cut its foreign aid budget, and so this team would have been essentially cut loose. Their people would have been laid off, their equipment would have disappeared to the four winds, and the villages that they are serving would have waited who knows how long. So we stepped in, we took over the funding of Team 53, and we've been doing it now. This is our 3rd year. Restoration Laos is the small nonprofit. It's a 501c3 that I founded a couple of years ago to support and channel this work. And it's work that I'm so excited to get to do. Here's why I love it. First of all, Jesus tells us to take care of and to love and to serve the poorest of the poor, and Laotian farmers near the Vietnamese border, that's it. They are 3 miles away by dirt road in the good season, and they're unreachable by mud path in the rainy season. It's remote, it's poor, and it's partly poor because of the bombs that the United States dropped. And I love it because it's so concrete. You know, when I was working in the bishop's office, I loved that too. I mean, I've been really, really lucky. I've loved the different pieces of work that I've done, but that was like wrestling imponderables and intangibles all day long. And I would go home and Derby would say, "What did you do today?" And I would think, well, I said a lot of words. This, you know, this work will go on for longer than I'm alive, but every single field that gets cleared can be planted. Every single village that gets cleared, people can live without fear. Every single schoolyard that we go through and demine, children can play without their parents worrying that they may explode before the end of the day. And that's not metaphor. I mean, children actually do find these bombs. Saturday morning cartoons in Laos include bomb education for children.
Michael,
Yeah, please.
You also have to say, in Korea, one of the problems was the scrap metal, the bomb scraps. The children would hunt for it because of the fact that they could get money for the metal
Yes.
content.
Yes.
And because of that, they would pick up the wrong ones. Is that an issue there as well?
It has been, it's less now because the scrap metal market is depressed, hallelujah. But no, you're absolutely right. For many years, it was a serious problem I mean, for many years, there were shell casings and bombs everywhere. You didn't have to use a metal detector to find them. You could go and pick them up. Sort of like they described codfish in the Gulf of Maine 300 years ago. They were just around. Not as true now. What is there, and there's so much still there, but the easily visible stuff is no longer as accessible. And yes, children and adults and everybody would use $10 metal detectors from Vietnam and go and find these things and try to melt them down, and that did not always go well. It's not happening now nearly as much because scrap metal prices are down. If scrap metal becomes more valuable next year, it could become a problem again. I go every year and I visit our team. They are lovely people. They're beautifully trained. They know what they're doing. This is Pizza Mai. She is the team medic. And she will tell you, if you ask her, that she has never had to take care of a bomb injury to a team member. She takes care of lots of motorbike injuries for villagers, but she's always there because the risk is always real. And they're beautifully trained to mitigate and to manage that risk, to know what they're doing. And if they find a bomb that is bigger than they know what to do with or more complicated, they have resources that they can call on to come in and bring a higher level of expertise. And they're incredibly careful. Every time they find one of these bombies, they pack it with plastic explosive. They unreel 300 yards of detonator cable. They blow it up, and from 300 yards away, you can feel the shockwave going through your chest, as can every villager who's living nearby, including those who felt the shockwaves 50 years ago when they were probably living in caves to try to stay away from the bombs. A whole generation of Lao children grew up in caves. They clear the land, the sirens go off, they blow up the bomb, and then they're on to the next one. So they're very careful and they're very skilled. You could probably hear in my voice how much I love, well, I hate that this work needs to be done. I love the fact that I have the chance to do it and to try to do something that seems so real. And I would love your help and your support. And that could take any number of different forms. It costs about $150,000 a year to keep our team working. And so I spend a lot of time fundraising. And I said in the sermon, let's be real together. So let's be real together. I would love your financial support if you're moved to help. And there are brochures and envelopes over there. Restoration Laos is a 501c3. If you care to donate electronically, we will soon be able to receive that directly, but for the moment, Minds Advisory Group, our operating partners, are receiving electronic donations on our behalf and crediting it to our team. The other thing that I really would love, and Grace Church is a fabulous place to ask for this, is introductions. The more times I get to tell this story, the more people that I can connect with. First of all, the more Americans begin to know about this little chapter of our history. But also, I've found myself increasingly invited all over the United States to talk about this. And so, you know, if you are a member of a church, a club, a veterans group, an organization, something that is, you know, beyond the Maine Episcopal universe, I can't tell you how much I would love to be connected. I've been as far as Bainbridge Island, Washington, so far, and I've said I will go anywhere I'm invited, and I will. So truly, if you can help connect me with people who you think might be interested in and responsive to this, that would be an enormous gift. I think that's a lot of words from me, and I'd like to stop, but I'm going to leave you with this image. This is a rice paddy When a rice paddy is planted, it is backbreaking work, but it's communal work. The entire village forms a line and everybody goes through the paddy planting these rice plants. And you know, for backbreaking work, it looks an awful lot like a barbecue. And this little girl, who's dressed in the traditional Lao costume, Lao dress that almost every Lao person, every Lao woman actually wears, is running across a berm separating two rice fields, and she is not exploding. And I don't want her ever to have to worry about exploding, or any of her children or her children's children or anybody that she knows. And bit by bit by bit, we're making that possible. So that's the work. Thank you for letting me come and tell you about it. And thank you for being my home when I first discovered all of this. Thank you. And I would welcome questions. Yes, I saw Roger and then Marty.
How can you safely dig up one of those bombs?
You don't move it. So the bomb is in the soil. And one of the bomb technicians will take a little trowel and very carefully scrape down next to the bomb so that like that much of it is exposed. Without moving it, they then pack it with sandbags, plastic explosives and sandbags and blow it up. It's astonishing to me how quickly they can excavate one of these things, knowing that they're not going to I guess if you've done it 1,000 times, you get good at it, but it looks to me like they're moving faster than I would want to move if I were doing what they were doing. But that's what they do. And if they find a big bomb, then they, and some of these are huge. The cluster bombs are the ones that are there in their tens of millions, but they also find big bombs, you know, from here to the piano. And those they don't move or do anything to until they get a higher level of technical sophistication, in which they have on call.
But if they move, they would explode or could explode.
Yep, if there are two ways that they can explode, other than being packed with plastic explosive. One is to move, because then that arming mechanism that was supposed to move when they fell through the air and twirled, if they twirl now, they can arm and then they'll explode. The other way is if somebody builds a fire near one, and Lao people generally cook on charcoal on the ground. And so, so even if they're not excavated, if somebody builds a cooking fire on top of one, they can blow up. And that, you know, if we were talking about the U.S., that would be a pretty abstract worry. But in a country where, you know, there are 8 million people, it's not heavily urbanized in Laos, and an awful lot of people are building their cooking fires in the fields where they're harvesting or planting their rice. It's a real thing. Marty.
This is a strange question, but what did you wear when you were over there? You didn't wear your collar and your...
I don't, and this is not an Episcopal Church mission. It's one that is heavily supported by the Episcopal Church, the Diocese of Maine, and other dioceses now, and churches all over the country. But Laos is, when they came out from behind the bamboo curtain, they didn't come all the way out. It's still a communist autocracy. They are not particularly welcoming of organized churches. There are 3 legal ones. There's the Roman Catholic Church, there's a kind of an evangelical Protestant church, and then for some reason that I don't fully understand, there are the Seventh-day Adventists. But they're not interested in having the Episcopal Church there in a kind of an organized way. And to the extent that Laos is part of the Anglican world, they are under the authority of the Diocese of Singapore, which also would not welcome having us coming in sort of doing an Episcopal thing there. So I wear a polo shirt and a floppy hat, and the Restoration Lao logo, which was designed by Liddy. This is Cam Wan province. This is the province where we work. This is the Vietnam border. This is right about where our team is. And this is a rice shoot that is designed to symbolize the reason for doing this work. So our team wears that patch, and I do too when I'm over there. I think Pasha and then Connie
Just
and then Debbie.
one thing,
Yep.
one thing. Can you talk about, Lois's contribution to helping you to raise money, or do you even know?
I didn't know until I saw it there, so I can say a word, but other people may know more than I do. Let's hold that until the very, let's do a couple more questions, and
Okay.
then I want to make sure people feel free to go in peace, but I will stick around and talk to anybody for as long as you want until it gets dark or beyond. So, Pasha.
Started to answer this partially. My question is, what role, if any, does the national church play? And can you bring something forward at convention to educate more people?
I will bring something forward at diocesan convention where I think I'm going to be a featured speaker. And we were present, sort of through the agency of others at the general convention last summer. And what I'm finding is increasing interest from other dioceses. The capital T, the Episcopal Church, is not going to be an organizational sort of institutional partner in this for the reasons that I said, but there's an awful lot of Episcopalian interest and uptake, particularly in some of the corners of the Episcopal Church that are interested in Asian mission. So I'm working very carefully to have this be what I've referred to as church adjacent rather than a church project, because that is more respectful to our Anglican partners in Singapore, and it's more palatable to the Lao government, and it's actually true. One of the things that I said to Bishop Brown fairly early was that I was dedicated to doing this, and that I really wanted the support and the prayers and the help and the involvement of the church. But I didn't want it to get stuck in church management, which can sometimes be a lot of words, as I mentioned earlier from my days in government. Mark.
I'm a Vietnam vet, and we heard a lot about the Ho Chi Minh Trail when I was there. I had no idea the number of bombs that were dropped. My question is, Michael, did we drop the bombs along the border of North and South Vietnam?
An awful lot of them were dropped there. If you look at the Lao map, and I will wrap up very, very soon. But the DMZ, the north-south border, was I'm not good enough to mark it exactly, but it was basically across this narrow neck here. Our team is working right here because so many of the goods and the soldiers and the people who traversed the trail came across a mountain pass right north of the demilitarized zone. But we actually bombed all the way along the trail because there's kind of a choke point at the entry, but there were increasing numbers of thousands of tons and thousands of people moving along the trail as the war advanced, and so we attacked all of it.
But one more question for Connie, then I have a couple of announcements. I'm just curious about communication. I'm sure you're learning the language.
No.
I was hoping you'd say something. And do they speak, your team, do they speak some English? Do you have a translator? All of it. How do you communicate?
Cũng không coi bao ao pasar Anggit. They were coi bao pasar Lao. They were booking Lai. Which is to say, our team does not speak English, but I do speak Lao, not particularly well. When I'm actually there, I have a translator who is very helpful. When I'm not with the team, I don't have a translator, and I'm getting better. And it's really satisfying. It's really fun. The Laos script is so loopy and beautiful, and it's fun to learn something so new. So thank you all. As I say, I'm not going away, so stick around afterwards if you want to talk about it.
Thank you, Michael. Deacon Lois Hart donated several of her books, and all proceeds, if you add something to the basket, please let's not leave any books here. Every penny, whatever you can donate, will go towards Restoration Laos. Please make sure to check the back table if you would like to support this cause. I'm so grateful, Michael. Please give him another hand.
Thank you.
And Frank,
Oh, and I'm just gonna say, and that, we have brochures back there, and we have Restoration Aloud brochures back there, and I hope, everybody do take one. If you're moved to donate, lovely. Take several and pass them on, and as I said, I would welcome invitations onward. Okay, I'm gonna stop.
and Frank has agreed to pray us out.
The Lord be with you. Let's pray. Lord, focus us even on events and dangers far away. Help us to take responsibility, because indeed they are our responsibility. Open our hearts and our arms and our minds to remember that our neighbors are not just the folks right next door, but also the folks halfway around the world. Help us to love our neighbor and to do all each of us can. Amen.
Amen.
And please bless Jeff and Ira by taking your dishes back.
Half steps when you both out. Because that,